leave and be replaced with a new guard who would be chained to Paul. What do you think Paul talked about during those 4 hours? Can you imagine having your congregation chained to you? My guess is that some of them were happy to see their relief guard come. They would say, "Boy, am I glad to see you. This man Paul is trying to make a Christian out of me." Many of them did come to know Christ. The gospel penetrated Caesar's household. Later, Tertullian wrote that the Roman government became disturbed when it was discovered that Christians were in position of authority. Many of these men later died for their faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. This is the first evidence Paul gave that his imprisonment had not hindered the furtherance of the gospel, but that it had enabled him to bring the gospel right into Caesar's household. Not only did Paul's imprisonment enable him to reach into Caesar's household with the gospel, but it also accomplished something else. And that it concludes that section. Now we're going to go on to the next section, which is section verse 14. It was nice whenever I was going to jails and prisons. It was kind of like I had a captivated audience. They couldn't go anywhere. They had to listen to me. I kind of miss those days. These days, people are free to get up and leave, I guess. I don't know. We don't do that. But in verse 14, and many of the brethren in the Lord wax confident by my bonds, are much more bold in speaking the word without fear. In the early church, there were many men who were willing to go out and witness for Christ. But after hearing Paul speak, they would say something like this: "Man, I'd like to witness for the Lord, but I can't tell it like Paul tells it." So long as Paul was out preaching the gospel, others would feel unworthy, not competent, or sufficiently trained. They considered Paul so much more effective than they would be. No wonder also Paul was attacked, and they would be like, "Well, if they belittle him, what would they do to me? I really deserve belittling." But when one day the word went down the Roman road to all those centers where churches had been established that Paul was in prison in Rome, in many of those churches, men would say, "Look, Paul's in prison. He can't go out anymore. I'll go." As a result, many men started to preach the gospel. I am confident that hundreds or maybe even thousands of men hit the Roman roads and moved out from door to door to tell men about Christ. So Paul says, "Many of the brethren in the Lord, waxing confident by my bonds, are much more bold to speak the word without fear." Now, and you notice they're door to door. We don't do that anymore because we're afraid. We need to get out and hit the pavement and go door to door. Now, I believe there is a third effort of Paul's imprisonment, which he uh, does not mention. He can only get this from the perspective of his history. Paul may not have realized the importance of his writing, but if he had not been put into prison, he would not have the prison epistles: Ephesus, Philippians, Colossians, and Philemon. They are all marvelous epistles, and we would not have them today if Paul had not been in prison. I am sure the Lord could have gotten this teaching to us some other way, but this was the way he chose. So Paul could say about his imprisonment that it had fallen out rather than unto the furtherance of the gospel. There was, however, a tragic difficulty in Paul's day. We have the same thing happening in this day, and it is still tragic. And